have a wonderful webinar for you. Peter Handberg is a senior advisor with WealthHQ, and he will take us through the 4 key financial moves we can make to circle the wagons to survive the now, assess our super and investments to minimize the hit and ride the recovery back, be money secure by creating a framework for financial resilience, and deploy key strategies to engage, motivate, and accelerate us towards our financial goals and life goals. Peter is the senior advisor at WealthHQ with 20 plus years in financial advice and corporate strategy. Peter is passionate about getting clients in control of their money and implementing effective strategies to get ahead. His straightforward advice gives his clients the peace of mind of feeling money secure and excited about their financial future. So everybody, thank you again for joining us. Peter, I'll hand it on over to you.
Thank you for having me along, Kate. It's great to be here. And I hope it is a timely presentation. This whole COVID-19 thing has permeated every part of our life. It's changed the way we work, it's practically shut down our ability to socialise, and it's going to impact how the economy is governed for quite a while ahead. But one of the great adages that I try to live by is that tough times never last, but tough people do. Now, by that I don't mean that you need to be some sort of Clint Eastwood tough guy from a movie. Being able to tough it out, you really only need 2 things. You just need a positive mindset and you need a plan. That'll get you through. And there are plenty of positive things we can do. Look, in the grand scheme of things, we're already in the midst of this whole COVID thing. So this presentation is about what we can do to weather the storm that we're already in, how we can be prepared for the road ahead, and definitely be better prepared for anything else that might come along in the future. So who's this presentation for? Well, it's all about giving good financial guidance, but specifically it's about taking actions or putting strategies in play that we can use in the here and now to get through what is a particularly tough time. We're working through what's fundamentally a health issue, and clearly that's our highest concern. But with the shutdown of and the effect it's having on commerce and industry, it's rapidly becoming a financial issue as well. Businesses are slowing down, jobs are being lost or reduced, and governments are eating into massive amounts of public spending to keep things going. So by now, I imagine that most of us have a reasonably clear understanding of how COVID has and will affect us directly. But here's the thing, we don't necessarily have a clear view on where it's exactly going to go from here. So there's no doubt that most of us will have some sort of awareness or have been focused on our finances, because some of us have taken a direct hit to our income or our assets, and others simply because we've become aware of how something so out of the blue yet so significant can hold us all to account. It's really become a bit of a reality check for all of us, certainly from a financial well-being perspective. So I understand there's a really good list of people that have logged in today, so I'm figuring that you're all taking a proactive approach and you're looking to uncover some ideas to get you to a better place, financially speaking. If the fallout from COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that future-proofing our financial security is absolutely imperative. So hopefully there's going to be some great strategies for us to go through. I'm even catering to some strategies for a few of us that fall into this group here. I hope that's not too many of us, but I did laugh when I saw this one come up on Insta recently, and I thought that's probably quite true for a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of us have been in this boat, but we don't need to be there. There's no magic wands, and I don't have any rabbits I can pull out of a hat, but I can put forward some straightforward strategies and some good guidance to get you to exactly where you want to be. So what are we covering? Effectively, we're going to be looking at a few things. The first thing that we want to do is to, as Kate said, circle the wagons to survive the now. Now, there's a few things, and I hope this section 1 doesn't pertain to too many people, but and a lot of it we already know, but there's government support out there, there's debt relief, we can even access our super. So if we're in trouble, there are things we can do right now. The second move that we can look at taking is protecting our super and investments. We can assess and protect what we've got at the moment, and then we can position ourselves for a recovery as it goes forward. Thirdly, I want to look at some smart strategies we can put into play. We can deploy some key strategies to engage, motivate, and accelerate us towards our financial and life goals. And a key part of that, from my perspective, is to engage and motivate people. If you understand where you're at, where you can be, and you know what you need to do to get there, you'll knuckle in, you'll get it done, you'll be excited about where it can take you. And even though this is a tough time, I've noticed amongst the people I'm working with and those around me, people are looking for people that have a positive can-do attitude. This is actually a golden time to make things happen and pull things together. So I think these strategies will help you get there. Fourthly, the fourth key move is building financial resilience. What can we do to make ourselves money secure by creating a framework for financial resilience? So we'll look at those strategies. And then lastly, I want to pull it all together into a roadmap, if you like, for success. I want to get you to the point where you have the money things sorted. And my definition of having the money things sorted is your money's working as hard as you are, your wealth is growing through an automated investment and saving strategy, you know how much you need to achieve to get your financial freedom and what you need to do to get there. And the main one, you've stopped worrying about it and you hardly ever think about it. So before we get into it, it's genuinely important that we go over the disclaimer. While today's plan is to cover off some really good key financial strategies that work really well, it's important that you understand it's general information only. It's not personal advice, and you need to get some professional advice before acting on it. We also do some projections later on that use conservative return assumptions. And while those return assumptions are conservative, they, as the adage says, past performance isn't always a reliable indicator of future performance. So let's get into it, but I want to start by setting the scene. We need better outcomes. Now, this pie chart paints a fairly gloomy picture that we don't need to be a part of. But of a group of 25-year-olds some time ago, by the time 100 of them make it to retirement, a quarter of them won't even have made the journey. And nearly 2/3 of them will be using, to some extent, some government support through way of a pension. 8% of us will still be working, and only 5% of us will be financially independent, with only 1% genuinely wealthy. It shouldn't need to be like that, and it doesn't need to be. Now, the reality is, Australians worry about money. And in fact, even before Corona hit, statistically, nearly 2/3 of us were either stressed or concerned about money. We worry about money regularly, and it's not just the people that are doing it tough. 2/3 of us worry about money at least monthly, and a quarter of us worry about it every day. But the thing that shocked me was 1/3 of Australians with at least $1 million in investable assets, they worry about money at least monthly as well. It really is a concern to all of us. So I'm hoping today, and what we do in general, is very much about fixing that. It's about easing the anxiety that too many of us are feeling, and looking to a range of smart strategies to get ahead and to move on towards our financial and life goals. And you know what the best bit about all of that is? When you feel good about how your finances are coming together, the ripple effect permeates into every other part of your life, into your career, your relationships, your overall health and well-being. It is absolutely so worth it. So have a quick look at some of the stats on the next page. Financial advice has definitely improved people's financial position. There's no doubt about that. But the benefits go way beyond just having more money. Many other, probably more important aspects of people's lives that benefit from taking on good advice or good guidance. For a lot of people that suffer this, I mean, mental health and detriments in their family life has been a significant part of it. But to get out of it, for most people, it's simply a case of you just don't know what you don't know. For others, they might want to do it, but they just don't know where to start. And for most of us, though, we just don't have the time or the inclination to get the ball rolling, and even the best laid plans inevitably slip onto the never, never. So let's have a look at some of the things we can do. The first one is all about circling the wagons, and I hope that we can gloss over this fairly quickly, and I hope it doesn't pertain to too many of you, and a lot of this is already news that's out there for you. But there are government payments. There's fortnightly JobKeeper payments of $1,500. And that's paid to companies so that they can keep their employers engaged. But you can apply for it if you are also self-employed. There's support for businesses. The government and banks are providing numerous financial support options. That includes government wage assistance, cash flow boosts. There's business loan guarantees and instant asset write-off expansions. There's fee waivers, loan deferrals, and other sorts of support from your bank. Now, this is very much the accountant's domain, so hopefully you've all got a good accountant. Go and speak to them. They're the ones that can help you. And by the way, there are other changes coming up. And if you tune in this time next week at lunchtime on the 6th of August, together with an accountant, I'll be hosting a support package info session again through Victory Offices, so you can log into that through Eventbrite, and we'll go through the latest changes that have just come in the last few days. So there's plenty out there, but there are things we can do. When it comes to looking at things from a personal perspective, mortgage relief, Banks are offering all sorts of relief. They can do fee waivers, mortgage deferrals, interest rate freezes and payment reductions. With your credit card or personal loans, some of the rates have come down of late. They're reducing or pausing minimum repayments and refunding late fees. Most of them have come to the party to some extent, not the shining white knight that we might have all hoped for, but they're at least coming in and aware of the problem, and hopefully they've got at least an ear open to what your situation might need. So if you need to speak to your bank, go and speak to them, and the same with your loan and credit card providers. Even consider shopping it around, finding better rates, looking for better credit cards. There's a whole variety of things you can do. Now, one of the other things you can do in knowing all of your financial assist options is you can also look at your personal spending. You can put in requests for financial hardship for bills. If you've got bills due for essential services, contact them. Explain your situation and tell them you'd like to apply for financial hardship. Tell them that you might want to be able to pay your bills in instalments or ask for an extension. You can also put together what we call bill smoothing, and that's where you can ask them to say, try and average what you do owe, and you can pay it over a weekly, fortnightly, or monthly basis to help you with your budgeting. There's also rental relief. So I don't know whether you're on the giving or receiving end of needing some assistance with rental relief. Read up on your options. It's quite extensive, and make contact with your landlord. I've also seen recently that some insurance relief is coming through as well. So car insurers and home insurers are also beginning to offer better rates and discounts. And I got a $50 gift card from my car insurer because I haven't been driving for the last 3 months, but hopefully they can do better than that as well. But there are opportunities. So this whole section about circling the wagons is protecting your position. If you're in trouble, reach out. There are people that can help, whether it's from a specific money in hand perspective, speaking to some of these people I just mentioned, speak to your accountant or an advisor and get some guidance on what you can do to move forward from here. One of the big topics that's come out, there's been a huge amount of press coverage lately about being able to withdraw money from superannuation, a total of $20,000, $10,000 in each of the 2 financial years. To the extent that they've just extended the deadline, it was going to expire at the end of September, they've now pushed it out to the end of December 31st, so the end of this year. But people have been saying it's a really bad idea and it can have a significant detrimental effect to your future savings. And in isolation, they're absolutely right. I'm going to show you a graph in a minute of the impact that withdrawing some money out of your super can have, and it is significant. So in terms of the rules, you can access a further $10,000 if you've already done it, or a new $10,000 right up to December 31st. If you are unemployed, you're on a Centrelink payment, or after the 1st of January this year, you were made redundant, had your work hours reduced by 20%, or if you're a sole trader, there was a reduction in your turnover of 20% or more. You won't pay any tax on the super you withdraw, and it won't affect your Centrelink entitlements, but you can only do it through MyGov. So if you need to do it, think about it carefully. On the whole, I would be strongly advocating that you don't do it. It can make a big hole in your future plans, and it should very much be a path of last resort. But let's have a look at it in context. So, the situation, if you had a super balance of $100,000 and a salary of $80,000 and you were getting returns of 7%, if you didn't withdraw your money versus keeping it in, you can see that the graph makes a fairly significant difference. And you can see that over 10 years and 20 years, it can be the difference of, 20 years, it can be the difference of $100,000. And for most of us, we're probably looking at 20 years before we go to access this as well. So think about withdrawing $20,000 today and it costing you nearly $100,000 at retirement. If you're particularly young, potentially up to $200,000. So it is a very expensive option. But what I want to do though is consider it in context. So absolutely I'm saying don't do it unless it's the last resort. But if you're flat out struggling and you've exhausted all other options, you may have no choice. So go ahead and do it. You've got to survive. Or let's say you have a compelling need for it. There may be some really worthwhile need for it. You want to pay off a horrible credit card debt that's charging you 20% per annum. Or you need to pay the kids' school fees to keep them in the school of their choice. So there can be some good reasons for it. Also, if you have a plan to replace it as soon as you can, you can even think of it as a worthwhile tax deduction as soon as you get back on your feet, financially speaking. So the other thing you can think about is that if you're of the view that the investment markets, because of Corona or whatever it might be, are going to be flat or even go backwards over the foreseeable future, then the opportunity cost is actually pretty small, and it could even be positive if you pull it out and you miss out on a decline in the marketplace. So act only on a worthwhile need. Have a plan in place to replace it as soon as you can, but it shouldn't be an exercise in gambling on what you think the market's going to do. But if you have a choice, your crystal ball suggests to you that your money in super is going to be flat for the next 6 months, that you're staring at a $10,000 credit card with 20% interest payments, and you absolutely believe that very shortly afterwards you've got to replace it through very worthwhile tax-deductible contributions into super, it can actually be quite a good strategy, but you absolutely need to have all your ducks in a row before you would even consider that. So it is significant. I know that graph, I think it's interesting in that it looks fairly flat and it's only a marginal slice of difference, but it is big in the long-term thing. So get some guidance and consider your options before you do it. Number 2 in terms of key moves for Corona is looking out for what we've got. The COVID crisis is causing havoc in many areas of life, not least of which is on the share investment market. Share prices have been fluctuating wildly as investors around the world try and work out what's going on as this whole pandemic plays out. From its high point in March, the Australian stock market lost nearly, or in fact more than a third of its value before recovering some ground over the last month or so. But the market is absolutely all over the shop at the moment. The Corona pandemic has created the largest daily fluctuation since the Great Depression. The US market's been averaging daily changes of nearly 5% through March and April as well. It's higher than the GFC and the 87 share market crash. It's really hard to work with at the moment. But the thing is, we still don't have a clear picture at all of how or when this pandemic's going to go away. And while the investment market volatility continues, we need to think about and look at what this means to our super, our investments, and our retirement savings. But you know what? Whilst it is a troubling time, it's not all bad news. I want to try and again put this in context. Interest rates are absolutely at all-time record lows at the moment. The Australian corporate balance sheets at the big end of town are generally pretty strong with our big companies. The Australian government has a strong fiscal position, and we'd have to be optimistic that a vaccine will be found at some stage, hopefully sooner than later, and the economy will eventually, as it always does, return back to normal. So that's the situation. We are in a tough time. We know it will get better. We don't know when. But so what do we do right now? Should we be changing our investments? Should we be selling? And you know what? This applies to all of us, whether we've got personal investment portfolios or not. We've all got super, and super is probably the most important and biggest investment we have behind our home. So let's give us some context. Firstly, what's done is done. We are where we're at, and there are no do-overs. So on top of that, none of us own a crystal ball, so we can only operate from where we are now and work with the things we can control. Let's have a look at the share market over a longer period of time. This is the Australian share market over 20 years. It's been an absolute roller coaster, but it's served us well. Have a look at that average. I actually think, as much as that's a very mountainous trough and a peak graph there, that orange line is remarkably consistent all the way through. Now, I understand that if you had your money up here at the start of the GFC and it fell to here, then it would have been troubling. But it's absolutely fared quite well. I mean, if you look at it in context, have a look at how it's gone over the last 100 years against the big share market worries that we've ever had. You can see there that we've got the 87 share market crash, which was the biggest one-day crash in history. And that was 52% in one day. And then we got the GFC over the 2008 period, and that fell over half of the value of the market as well. But you can see again through this orange line, the market does recover. It always has, and whilst I can't guarantee it always will, we've had 11 major crashes over 100 years, and they've all recovered quite well. So what would happen if you let the share market anxiety get to the better of you? I think this is one of the better graphs I've ever seen. Let's look at the GFC as a case in point. It was monumental. The market fell over by half. And there were plenty of people that were freaking out, and quite rightly too. I mean, if you just retired at the start of the GFC and you were looking at a very different future if all of a sudden your retirement nest egg was half of what it used to be. So let's have a look at your options. Imagine you had $100,000 invested just before the GFC. There's 3 graphs here. But firstly, imagine that you started here, you watched the market falling all the way down here, and to the point that this day here, you said, that's it, I'm out. This is just, it's killing my superannuation. It's driving me crazy. I'm pulling my hair out. I'm out. I'm going to put my money into cash and I'm going to leave it there. The share market's not for me. And you're just drifting along over a period of time and left your money in cash. Alternatively, You watched your investments or your super falling to the point where you broke and you said, right, that's it, I'm out. I've got to look after my super, I've got to bail out, I'm going to sell out. And you sit on it for a year and you tick along in cash for a year, but you're watching this graph here, the recovery is going up and up and up. You think, oh, well, maybe it's okay now. Maybe we can get back into it. So they jumped back into the market at this point here and they rode the recovery back. But you can see there's some massive differences there. If you had stayed in cash, you would have lost half your money and still been at $55,000 at 10 years later. If you jumped back in a year later, a year has cost you nearly $80,000. But if you stayed in the market because you've understood that the market goes up and down, it always has, always will, but you know that there's nothing you can do about it apart from not letting yourself become a victim to it. You could have stayed in the market, ridden it back. It would have been a rocky road, as you can see, but you would have got nearly 2.5 times your money back in 10 years. So that's not a bad return. So the upshot here is that we should never sell out at the wrong time. It's all about time in the market, not timing the market. Let's have a look at how this has played out for, say, the average American investor. Look at the slide here. You can see that the 20-year average for the share market back in 2016 in America was 7.7%. But the average investor over in America only got a return of 4.8. It's a difference of 2.9%. This is what we call a behavioural gap. These are people that had their tea leaves and their crystal balls and everything lined up, and they were trying to second guess the market, and they were trading in and out. It just doesn't work. It's a road to nowhere. So I would absolutely advocate that we work on the theory that we staying with the course, and it's about working with what we can control and avoiding, or at the very least not worrying about what we can't control. I do get a giggle out of this. I've got plenty of friends who are stockbrokers, and I know they do a great job, but to me, I've always thought this is not a bad depiction of it, because you simply don't have a crystal ball. So what do we have control over? Let's have a look at a couple of different things. Firstly, there are some things we have no influence or no control over, and that includes things like investment markets, legislation, exchange rates, and interest rates. If anyone tells you they have the ability to predict those things, you need to run a mile. I definitely can't control any of them, and half the time I can't even predict them. But what I can do is set people up with strategies so that they're not a victim to them. Some things we do have some influence over, and this is where you guys come in. It's about setting client goals and objectives and sticking to them and having the discipline to see it out. Some things we can absolutely control. And these are the things we can work with. It's all about strategy and advice. It's all about investment choices, diversification, staying disciplined, and along the journey, minimising tax and expenses along the journey. So let's have a look at some of these different approaches might play out. The domestic market, over 10 years, you can see that the Australian market has lagged massively behind the US market. It's gone up so much better. And when you think about it, Australia, great country, but we are effectively a nation of big banks, and we're really good at digging things out of the ground. We have very little exposure to technology, biomedical, renewable energy, manufacturing. So we need to look over the fence if we're going to get into other markets, if you want to be fully part of a growing and evolving global market. So if you're just in Australia, you will lag behind. And you can have a look at different sectors. This is a comparison here of the tech-laden NASDAQ. There is actually a fund that you can invest in, a low-cost fund that invests in what are colloquially known as the FANG stocks. So they're things like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. You've also got your Microsofts and Intels and PayPals in there. But if you have a look at that, you can see here's the Australian market, which over the last 1 year, this is just 1 year, and this is the corona impact of it. You can see it affected all the tech stocks as well. But Australia has averaged over the last year a return of nearly -8, whereas the NASDAQ, well, the NDQ fund with all the FANGs in it, went up by nearly 1/3, a massive difference. So you need to be aware of and open to different avenues beyond what we have just here in Australia. The other thing that is very contentious, well, it's not particularly contentious, but a hot topic around investment markets is how do you go about it? Should we take a passive approach or an active approach? Now, a passive approach is basically where you take your money and you drop it into the share market into what we call an exchange traded fund or an ETF, very cheap, and they basically take your money and spread it across the market, and then effectively put their feet up on the desk and let your investments just puddle along exactly as the share market does. So if the market goes up, your investments go up and down, whatever it might be. The other alternative is to use active funds, and this is where you give your money to a professional active fund manager, and they take your money and they invest it in stocks all around the world, depending on which sector they're into, but they actively trade it and investigate and research and pivot and do whatever they need to do on a daily basis to try and get the best returns they can. Now, if you've ever discussed this around a barbecue, you'll have heard invariably someone saying, well, there's no point in using fund managers. They're expensive, and nearly 2/3 of them, in fact, 3/4 of them can't even keep up with the index, so it's a waste of money. You know what? They're actually right. 3/4 of fund managers don't work, but there are 1/4 of them that are absolutely killing it. And if you do your research, you can put together a portfolio, which in my case, I blend out a mixture of passive and active to try and get the best of both worlds, and you can get some reasonably good returns. This is a graph here of a portfolio of Australian stocks that I use and the active fund managers that I work with. And you can see here across 5 and 10 years, the outperformance of active in green versus passive in grey has been nearly 6 and 4% over 5 and 10 years. It's been quite significant. The same goes for global equities. If you can look at this one here, over 5 and 10 years, it was 6.3% and 2.6%, so a big difference. And what I like about active management, you can see that just over the year to date in 1 year, over really tough times, they did even better. They seem to have the ability to preempt or at least pivot when things go pear-shaped and try and minimise the hit and look for opportunities to get a road back, whereas the passive funds just chug along, nothing ever changes, you do what the market does. So I think there's a really strong case for both. But to put it in context, over the last 5 years, the funds that I've been working on in orange here have outperformed the passive grey market by 21% over 5 years and 39% over 10 years if you choose the right funds. Now, it's all well and good to analyse this in hindsight, and whatever happened yesterday doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. You need to do your research and work out what's going to work for you. But the key points that always stand true, and these are the ones that you need to stick to, is that it is time in the market and not timing the market that's absolutely important. You need to have a plan and the discipline to stick to it. You need to consider where you stand with your risk profile. How much money or exposure do you want to have to these volatile but rewarding markets? You need to be well diversified in your investment portfolio so that you don't come a cropper if one particular sector falls over very heavily in the marketplace. Then the other factor you need to consider about is how you orientate your investments. Do you want to have a higher orientation to other sectors like tech or biomedical or property, whatever it might be, and then whether or not you want to take a passive or an active approach to investing. Lots to consider, and it's horses for courses. One size does definitely not fit all, but it is worth having a really good discussion with your advisor or your accountant to work out what works for you. So that covers off the investment markets. I want to move on to some of the smart strategies we can put into play. Now, when you start, there is so much to consider. There's so many different things to look at. What I want to do is look at a couple of the most powerful and popular strategies that can make a massive difference. But before we do that, we need to start with a very basic one of where do we keep or invest our money? If someone says to you, I've got the best investment since sliced bread and I can guarantee it's going to go through the roof, it's great. Well, where do you want to invest it? Do you want to put it in your own name? Or do you want to invest in it through your super fund? And you could have a self-managed super fund that allows you to invest in almost anything under the sun. So there's pros and cons to both. If you invest in your personal name, your money is readily accessible. That's probably the hot one. It can also, if you're using gearing or negative gearing, you can use it as a tax deduction. But the problem is that if you invest in something, hopefully because it's going to do really well, you're going to lose anywhere, well, up probably in the realm of 1/3 to 1/2 of it in tax. And that can be a real downer. Conversely, if you invested in the exact same investments in super, it's almost like a legalised tax haven. You'll be paying at most 15% tax, and once you get to a preservation age, which is effectively retirement, it's tax-free. It's just amazing. It comes with one major catch though. It's what they call preserved or locked, and you can't access anything you put into your super fund until you meet a condition of release, which is effectively retiring. So for most of us, that's going to be anywhere from 60 to 65. So super is amazingly powerful. Einstein always said that the most powerful force in the universe is compounding returns, and that is absolutely true. Superannuation is a government-sanctioned tax haven that's been designed to set you up for retirement that you want. So use it. It's absolutely brilliant, and it should be one of the centerpieces of your investment strategy. But the big caveat is that money you put into super is under lock and key until you hit 60 or 65. So as brilliant as super might be in putting money into super, make sure you don't starve on the way to the feast. So have a look at this this comparison here. We've got Jack and Diane. They're both 30. They've got $50,000 in super and they're earning $80,000. They both want to invest 10% of the salary. That's not much, 10%. If you've read The Richest Man in Babylon, you'll know that is one of the great secrets to success. Diane invests her money into super. Jack invests his money in his personal name. Look at the difference. Now, admittedly, this is over 30 years, so it's a big difference. But if Jack and Diane are both 30 at the moment, they get access to their money when they're 65, you can see here that it's a big difference. It's a difference of $800,000. And they effectively did nothing different. The only difference here is they're earning the same money, same situation, same everything, same tax rates, just that Diane used her super fund and Jack used his own personal name. Now, there's more to it than that, but those numbers are true, they play out, but it doesn't mean that super is always right for you. The main one being that anything you put in there is under lock and key. So as I said, you don't want to starve on the way to the feast. Another key strategy is to pay, that we get asked all the time, is if I can afford to save $100 a week or $200 a week, where's the best place to put it? Do I pay down the mortgage or do I contribute it into superannuation? Now, effectively, it's a philosophical debate. There's lots to consider. So think of it on these terms. If at the moment, hopefully your mortgage rate is starting with a 3, possibly even a 2, but let's say it's starting with a 3 or a 4, if you put some money against your mortgage, invariably, let's say you put $1 towards it, you had to go and earn about $1.30 before the government helped themselves to a third of it, for you then to be left with $1 to take it down to the bank and pay it off in an investment that is effectively getting you a return of 3 or 4%. So what's fantastic about it is that we don't like debt, we want to get rid of it, and it's also safe. You're guaranteed that outcome. It's brilliant in that respect. But if I was somehow able to use my crystal ball and give you a guarantee that if you put it into super, you'll get a return of 8%, then that's probably a better place for it. You're going to get, you can put the money in before the tax man takes his 30% out of it. You only lose 15%, so you're kind of getting anywhere from a 20% free kick when you put your money into super, and the tax is only 15% or 0 when you put it in there, and it's going to grow at hopefully 8% as a long-term average, as opposed to the 3 or 4% if you put it onto the home mortgage. So some people would say, hey, interest rates are so low, it's a lousy return, so direct all your money towards super. But someone else could equally say, hey, interest rates are so low, it's a golden opportunity to jump on board and pay down your mortgage as fast as you can. Because I suspect you might be kicking yourself in 5 years' time if mortgage rates go back up to 8, 9, 10%. You'll be thinking, oh my God, why didn't I pay that off when I had the opportunity? But hopefully it's because you watched your super balance grow and grow at a great rate of knots. So if you're going to try and work it out, you need to do some modelling to work out what's best for you. You need to work out the interest rates versus investment returns. Which do you think is going to get you the better outcome over a long time? Then you need to put tax into the equation, because that can have a 30% difference to where you're at. You need to think about your time horizon. If you put money to super, like I said, it's going to be locked until you're 65. So that could be 20 or 30 years for some of us. You also need to understand your appetite for risk. If you put it on the mortgage, it's guaranteed. You're going to get that return, safe as houses, literally. If you put it into super, it could be up 25% one year, it could be down minus 25 the next year, but hopefully a long-term average of 8. Plenty of food for thought, and it is a really good strategy, one or the other. So what's your best way to get ahead? I want you to have a look at this scenario here, because this is one I work with quite a lot, and this is what projection modelling is all about, to help you get a clarity of what your best options are and how you can get ahead. So consider Jack and Diane again. They're 35 now. They've got a $500,000 home with a mortgage. They're earning $100,000, and Diane's dropped to part-time. They've got a cost of living that allows them to have a surplus cash flow of $44,000 a year. They've got some money in super. They're in growth and high growth options. And what they want to do is work out what's the best way to get ahead, what's the best use of my surplus cash flow. So let's have a look at a couple of scenarios here. The first one is the base case. Let's say they've worked out they do have a surplus, but they're living the high life and they spend 100% of their surplus as it comes through. They're only paying minimum mortgage payments, they're not doing any salary sacrifice, and they're not doing any investments. Including the home, they're on track to retire at 65 with a total net wealth, including the home, of $2.2 million. We look at scenario one, where they decide to curb their high life a little bit and they decide to only spend half of their surplus and put the other half onto their mortgage. You'll see it makes a massive difference. Once the mortgage is paid out, they then start to direct that half of their surplus towards investments, and they'll end up with $2.9 million, a definite increase of $670,000, a big difference. However, look at scenario two. Same sort of scenario, but rather than putting 50% of their surplus onto the mortgage, they keep that at their minimum mortgage payments and they put the other 50% into investments. Could be in the share fund, whatever it might be. And again, even better return here, and that's working on the theory the share market gets a better return than the mortgage rates. That's something you need to look into your tea leaves to work that out, but on long-term averages, a much better outcome. Scenario three, they decide to knuckle down. They live the good life, but their surplus, rather than blowing it on all the extra things in life, they put 100% of their surplus onto the mortgage. They really want to knock it over. Once it's paid out, they then direct it into investing into some shares. They're going to get a return there of $3.9 million. So they're $1.5 million ahead, 70% more than if they did nothing. One step further, you can look at this. 50% of their mortgage, their surplus goes on the mortgage. So rather than 100%, they drop it to 50, but then put the other 50% into investing and then turn it into 100% once the mortgage is paid out. That will take them up to $4.9 million. It's a difference of $2.5 million. So effectively, if they went and sat down with someone, did some projection modeling, say, we have a surplus, we want to know the best place to use it because at the moment we're just blowing it. Look at that. Double their money at retirement, and that will make a massive difference when it comes to retirement. Have a look at how it plays out in a graph. These are all the four scenarios against the base case. Now, what's interesting about this is that a lot of us are sitting on the base case because we weren't aware of the options that we can have, but there are all these different things we can do. Now, you might not want to spend 100% or save 100% of your surplus. You might want to make it 80% or 70% or half. You can decide where you want to be on the spectrum. This is what's brilliant about this, is you can choose what works for you. We don't have to be the fun police. We don't all have to sit in the dark and eat baked beans to get ahead. We can find a happy middle ground. It's about looking after our future, but still enjoying the journey along the way. So have a look at some of these strategies and look at the massive difference it can make. What you need to understand though is over 5 and 10 years, it doesn't look that discernibly big, but that's where we need Einstein to come along with our compounding returns and the power of it, and you'll see it makes a massive difference. So I want to move into move number 4, which is all about building financial resilience. I love this adage. It's not your salary that makes you rich, it's your spending habits. And I'll also add one further. It's also what you do with the money you've got left over. So without doubt, your biggest asset, despite you thinking it might be your home or otherwise, your biggest asset is your ability to earn income. And your biggest strength is your ability to keep it and use it to best effect. So managing your money is more than just knowing what you've got in your bank account. It means watching what you spend and saving what you're able to. Nowadays, nearly every transaction can be automated and you're only one click away from purchasing anything you want on the net. So it's too easy to get caught up in spending and oblivious to where your money's going. And so as a result, money management these days can be much trickier than ever before. But there are strategies, approaches, tools and technologies to help. So whether you're high tech or low tech, these approaches work and can make a massive difference in where you're at. Projection modeling. There's all sorts of models out there that you can use. We use some very highly complex ones that do long-term projections and look at every which way you can to slice and dice it. But this will give you a big picture of where you're at. And what's most compelling about it is if you can see the difference. If you think about those graphs a little while ago, those 4 or 5 scenarios, you can choose where you want to be. And if you have that vision, you know where you can be and what you've got to do to get there. It lifts you out of that rut. It gives you a compelling conviction of where you want to be. And it gives you the enthusiasm and the positive mindset to say, yep, we're on the way. There's no magic wand and I wasn't made a millionaire overnight, but I am well on track to getting to where I want to be. Now, if you are tech oriented, there are plenty of technology things you can use. There are free apps in the Play stores or the app stores, or you can, and they're fairly rudimentary, but they do work, and you can even pay a little bit extra and get some fairly high tech ones. But if that works for you, use technology to help. The next slide is all about managing your money. It's kind of like controlling what you eat. It requires commitment, determination, and discipline. You can't afford to be the person that says, I'll start my diet tomorrow, and you never do. So one of the things that we look at, and there's a variety of ways of slicing and dicing this, but setting up your bank accounts from an automated place. If you're earning $80,000 and clearing over $1,000 a week or $1,200 or thereabouts, you've got everyday things that you need to spend. It's on your rent or your mortgage, food and bills, and just living and so on. Then get that directed automatically. Start building a rainy day account or an emergency fund so you're ready to deal with the unexpected and having an emergency fund if things go wrong. And lastly, you need to start investing in yourself, the one-day account. This is all about reaching your financial goals, making the most of your money and setting up your future. This is investing in you. And if you read a number of books about good financial management, they'll say this is who you should pay first. Pay yourself first, and then do these things here with the money that's left over. Now, some of them are mandatory, I get that, but it's all about sitting down and working out a plan to get you to where you want to be. I do like this one. Whatever you do, don't do nothing. And I love this cartoon, and it is so, so true. You need to set your financial goals now, and you need to work towards them. You can't afford to leave it for later. That's just that Einstein will tell you it's a recipe for disaster, well, not disaster, but you're selling yourself short. There's plenty of things you can do. But getting all your financial ducks in a row is all about having your goals written down and backing them up with a plan. If you have them written down, it means you can reference them, you can measure them, you can manage it, and you can keep track of your progress. And there are so many different things you can do. Start with a financial health check. There's free ones on the internet. Speak to your financial advisor or accountant and just start making a checklist of what are some of the things I can do to improve my situation. It's just about being smarter and strategic and working smarter, not harder. It doesn't mean you're going to miss out on things. You can do whatever you want to do. There's plenty of things you can do. Have a plan, set up an emergency fund, manage your debt. There's plenty of strategies we can do to go around churning bad debt into good debt. Diversifying your income so you're not susceptible if one thing in your world goes wrong. And create a long-term vision. Have a vision board, something that whatever your definition of success is, it's going to make you happy and take you to where you want to be. There's plenty you can do, and I really urge you to reach out to any one of a number of people that will be more than happy to help you sort it out. So on that note, I want to say thank you and to open up the floor to any questions if there were.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was incredible and like very, very detailed. I don't think I have too many questions aside from, I know you mentioned that there are a few different kinds of apps that you can use to help manage your cash. Is there a particular app that you would necessarily recommend?
Yeah, I've spent the last 6 months researching virtually every one of them under the sun, and they're all catching up pretty quickly. Depending on how tech-oriented you are, maybe just turn to your own bank and find out if the Commonwealth Bank or the ANZ's got an app you can use. The Commonwealth Bank's got a reasonably good one, ANZ not so good, but there are plenty of free ones out there that will link into your bank accounts, and some people, I mean, they all operate with bank level security, so hopefully you can feel reasonably secure, but they have the ability to automatically track and categorize where you're spending, and you can set yourself some goals. Now, I know some people that absolutely need to micromanage it. They're just not going to get anywhere unless they watch and track every cent they've got. Whereas other people, they just need some guiding ideas. Say, well, I just want an envelope system where when I get paid, I'm going to put some money towards the rent or mortgage. I'm going to put this money towards booze and shoes and having fun. And then another envelope for, you know, investing in my future so I can do what I want to do with myself and my family.
Now, this might be a little bit unrelated to what you do, but obviously money and our emotions are pretty linked. Is there anything that you would recommend people do in order to, you know, create a habit of saving? Because I know, like, you know, okay, for example, like my emotions so heavily linked to buying a new outfit. You know, I can always reason it away by saying, oh, it'll make me feel really good.
Yeah.
To the point where it becomes a bad habit. You know, do you have any ways of creating better habits around saving money?
Yeah, you can either take a carrot or stick approach. Now, you can either lock yourself into this mandated world using technology or envelope systems, whatever, so you just don't have a choice. You can't spend it. But the better way I think about it is actually saying, no, I've seen a vision. I've done some projection modeling. I know where I want to be. And you know, everyone understands the merits or virtues of going on a diet. If you need to lose weight or get fit, everyone understands that they should or could do it, but not everyone does it because it takes discipline. But if you can picture what life will be like if you are fitter, stronger, slender, or looking however you want is going to make you feel good, it motivates you. So in terms of a couple of emotional connectors is having that vision board and saying, well, I've just seen a graph that says that if I could do this, 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 and this, and largely they're not going to have any impact on how my life works, but I'm going to turn out to be 60% better off at retirement, then tell me you wouldn't get engaged. It really is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just
Can make
keeping
a big
those
difference.
a massive difference, as we saw. Yeah. Okay.
You
Great.
can also look at the whole psychology of it. I've read some fascinating studies that we have psychologically we have a much bigger aversion to losing money than we do to winning money. So they've done studies that if someone tripped over $100 on the footpath and picked it up versus losing $100 because it fell out of their pocket at the supermarket, the joy that they get out of finding $100 is this much, but the pain or grief of losing $100 is this much. So whilst everyone's looking around, standing around a barbecue saying, well, what's the next big thing? What can I jump on board? Absolutely, investigate and look for them. What I was talking about today is finding better opportunities and better places to invest your money. But the main thing is, rule number one, don't lose money. And as Warren Buffett, one of the biggest investors or most successful investors in history, says, rule number one is don't lose money. Rule number two, refer to rule one, don't lose money.
Beautiful. Now I have a question here from Stephen. He said, very good talk. With Jack and Diane, your example used Australian super. Your thoughts on this fund?
I used it simply for the fact that it's ubiquitous. Everyone knows it. A lot of the industry funds are doing really well, but the assumptions I used in that projection would have been the same. I could have called it Vic Super or Hester or Cbus or Catholic Super. Could have been anything. It would have been the same outcome because I'm assuming the costs are about the same and the returns are about the same. But when it comes to super, it is absolutely worth doing some investigations. And certainly you want to consolidate your super. You don't want to be paying two sets of fees where you don't need to. And you don't want to be paying any more fees than you need to. And you also want to be with someone that seems to know what they're doing and managing money. Australian super has always been at the pointy end of that list. They're very fee conscious and their returns have been certainly, I mean, if you think about the fact that there's hundreds and hundreds of super funds out there, they're always on and above the top 10 time in, time out. So again, I can't give product advice today, but I do happen to view Australian super as a really good option.
Yeah, beautiful. Wendy, did you have a question?
I did. So Peter, you know, all of us on the call today, we probably are, you know, really keen in understanding what we should be doing and kind of going, oh my God, why haven't I done this sooner? So really at the best of times, it is awkward and incredibly revealing speaking to somebody about money because it's such a taboo topic.
Yeah.
But with COVID and people experiencing a lot of different hardships, are people finding it easier to have conversations with you, or is it even having the opposite effect where people are even less likely to go and seek out professional help?
Well, it's been easier in the context that people have, their hand has been forced. They need to sit down and say, look, I've been exposed here that I'm not quite where I want to be, or I've got some money and I just want to know what's the best place to preserve or protect it or grow it going forwards. Look, it is really difficult because we all have this view of where we should be, and invariably, almost all of us don't think we are where we are. So it is hard to get the ball rolling and to get people to air their dirty laundry, but it's not dirty laundry. It's the same as everyone else. We're all the same. All I'm about is creating a buffet for people where they can sit down and see everything that's on the table, know what their choices are. They don't have to reveal to me what their spending habits are if they don't want to, but we can set out a plan and say, well, if all these choices are here. I could potentially recommend that you do this, 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 and this. And they can equally say, well, you know, my lifestyle or my time horizons or attitude to risk or whatever it might be, mean that I'm going to actually pick differently. But I think invariably everyone wants to get to a better place. So hopefully that's why they've tapped in today, because there are strategies out there that they may or may not have known about. But just take the initiative and go and speak to someone. Either do it yourself, do some research, whatever it might be, and go and speak to an expert and get it sorted out. It'll be the best thing you ever did. I kind of think of my role as, you know, it is quite mechanical in that I have to go and put the best strategies in place for people. But where I get the greatest joy from is just lifting the weight of the world off people's shoulders. They didn't know where they should be or what can be done, and all of a sudden they can sit at the dinner table and think, well, I don't need to worry about money anymore. I'm not the richest man on the block, but you know what? I know where it's at. I know where I'm going. I know what I can and can't do. I know what the outcomes are. So I just don't have to waste any more emotional or intellectual energy on it. I'm more relaxed. I can focus on my kids, my job, my career, be a better parent, better partner, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. I think that peace of mind is actually probably what the truest form of wealth is, isn't it?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Definitely. All right. Well, Peter, we'll have to wrap up because I'm quite conscious of your time. But would you mind telling us where we can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a website, wealthhq.com.au. If you log on there, there's opportunities to set up a free 15-minute introductory call to find out what could be possible. Send me an email. You can read or look at some of the resources we've got there to get you up and running. Plenty you can do. We'd love to hear from you.
Beautiful. Well, I'll include that information in the follow-up email that I will send to all the attendees that joined us here today. You can also find this video as well as our other videos online in our V library. And I mean, that's pretty much it from us today. So thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everybody for attending. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Peter.
Good night.